Thanks, guys. This is a Fox News alert on big protests over an epic budget battle in Wisconsin. We have got new evidence that the White House and Democrats are fanning the flames in an ugly showdown between state worker unions and a governor who says he is trying to save the state from financial disaster. That's not how the unions see it. Welcome to America Live on a Friday, a busy one at that. I'm Megyn Kelly. We are now learning that the Democratic National Committee is helping to orchestrate these mass protests in Wisconsin, recruiting folks to attend, driving people to the Capitol, and they are being supported by Organizing for America, a group described by the New York Times as the political machine for President Obama, the president's chief political apparatus. In fact, if you go to OFA's website, you will see a message saying Organizing for America is mobilizing on the ground in Wisconsin to defend the rights of public employees from an attempt by the governor to take away their right to organize. This, we now learn, is a new piece of this story, that this is not necessarily all grassroots, that it is very much organized by the DNC and indeed by the president's chief political apparatus. On the third day of protests, which we're watching today, teachers staging a mass sick-out, bigger than we've seen in the past prior days. They are angry over a budget bill that will strip them of their bargaining rights. Dozens of schools had to be closed, and the 14 Senate Democrats in Wisconsin who hightailed it out of the state yesterday so that they could not be arrested by law enforcement and forced back for a vote have not been seen since, leaving that vote on the budget hanging in the balance. It will not take place in the Senate until they get at least one Democrat. Chris Stirewalt is our Fox News digital politics editor and my guest now. Chris, this new piece of the story that OFA, again, described by the New York Times as the president's chief political apparatus and run by the DNC, paid for by the DNC, the URL is barackobama.com, is very much behind what we're seeing in Wisconsin.
Well, not only that, but the president himself, as you remember earlier this week, weighed in, called Governor Walker's measure, budget fix measure, an assault on unions, said we need to remember that these people are our friends and our neighbors. The White House is intimately involved in this process now, as you say, through their on-the-ground grassroots organizing. This is hugely important for Democrats, not only because it could set a national standard that other states might follow suit of Wisconsin, a traditionally Democratic state that's moved to the right in the 2010 election. Other states like Ohio may follow suit and take similar measures. But also, Megyn, you have to remember President Obama's path to a second term runs through Wisconsin. And if Governor Walker is successful in stripping these powers and this money away from government workers, it's going to be much harder for the president to win a second term.
But the president has to be careful here. He is under criticism right now for not doing more to tamp down on the deficit problems we have at the federal level. In fact, Speaker Boehner of the House just came out and said, I'm disappointed that instead of providing similar leadership to that we're seeing in Wisconsin, the president has taken this route, and he says, quote, I urge the president to order the DNC to suspend these tactics. These tactics, Chris, we learned today, have involved so far today storming the governor's personal house to the point where the police had to shut down the street where the governor's children live so they could try to go to the school. I guess their school's still open. And showing up at the homes of the Republican lawmakers who are prepared to vote in favor of this legislation. I mean, does Speaker Boehner have a point? Must the White House now speak to this?
Well, I think the White House is eventually going to have to speak to this. I'm sure they're hoping that this can roll into next week and perhaps some of the vitriol that is spewing out in Wisconsin will die down a bit. I think more likely what we're seeing now is the beginning of what is the seminal battle of the 2012 campaign and everything else that we'll see play out not just in state capitals but on the national level, and that's Democrats supported by government worker unions versus budget-cutting Republicans. That's the battle for today, and it's the one that the president has pretty clearly picked sides on.
They are taking it. We're watching Wisconsin. That's where the big news has been this week, Chris. But they apparently, OFA, this organization group that, you know, backed by the DNC and with the president, is taking the fight to Ohio and Indiana, just to name two more. So this is already spreading out beyond Wisconsin, thanks to this group, to other states where governors are trying to impose similar austerity measures, which are not necessarily that great for unions.
No, and also I think that you would expect to see that as the budget battle in Washington reaches its culmination over the next 2 weeks, that you would see similar tactics employed here in Washington against Speaker Boehner and his Republican caucus, because, again, this is what it all comes down to. Democrats are increasingly reliant on government employee unions to wield their political clout. And this is a huge issue for them, and they have to win this battle, because if they don't, they may not win very many going forward.
Chris Direwalt, thank you so much.
You bet.